One big thing that I think matters a lot to what brought me to where I'm at now is that the history at the school really matters a lot more than it might actually seem. And I'll give you one really good example of this. One of my favorite courses that I took at Whittier was it was called Workshop in Urban Studies. And I'm not sure if you guys still do a January term there.
Yep. Yes.
Oh, okay, great. So I took a Jan term where we studied the urban development history of Los Angeles and Tijuana with Les Howard. I think he's retired now. I'm not sure if he's still teaching at the school, but
He is.
it was a really remarkable class because it helped us understand how two cities that were really close to each other with a lot of cross-cultural influences actually came to develop and what they mean for each other on the economic level and cultural level. And we really got to work closely with communities in both different places, and it really opened my eyes to where Whittier is situated and the history of Whittier in South and East Los Angeles. I also decided to start doing a lot of digging into Whittier's history. It doesn't always get looked at as much because I had some great history professors who got me really interested in Nixon, and the only things that I ever heard about Nixon were, you know, the stuff that we sort of all grew up with. But my mother was born on the Blackfeet Reservation, and her family's all from a small community outside of Regina up in Saskatchewan. And that's what really led me down the path to working on my thesis at Whittier while I was there in sociology. And I come to find out that Nixon, for whatever issues he had, was actually an incredible advocate for tribal nations and Native American people in this country. He was really one of the people who sort of helped build the vision of self-determination, which is the era of Indian policy that we're in right now. And I had a lot of great access to that because of Whittier's history. There was a lot of work that he did with some of the local tribes in California while he was at Whittier. He had a lot of people around him that really influenced him, and he has actually been a really important person for federal policy when it comes to tribes. The other thing, building off of that I thought was absolutely critical when I was at Whittier, that I still use to this day, is really this cross-pollination that goes on at the school. I was really amazed at how much I could, work with a history professor, a sociology professor, any number of different professors or students on different projects. The thesis that I worked on while I was there was actually an incredible project studying my great-grandfather's printing press program at his Indian boarding school up in Saskatchewan. And he was actually part of the first printing press program at the turn of the century at the boarding school that he was at on his reservation in Saskatchewan. And so I actually had the opportunity to go up to our family's reservation up in Saskatchewan a few times and dig deep into the archives and actually get copies of the original student newspaper that he used to print along with his fellow students at the Presbyterian boarding school he was at. And I did a really interesting thesis working with my sociology and my history professors, really examining what the churches were trying to do to assimilate Native kids at the turn of the century. He eventually ran away and actually became the first employed typesetter at the Chicago Sun-Times, which is why we never read a Tribune in my family. So I thought that was really important because I don't think I would have thought about having an opportunity like that where I could look at the sociological implications and really pair them with what was going on historically in Canada at the time, and then understand what my grandfather moving to Chicago actually meant, not just to my own family history, but to the work I was going to continue to push forward in my career. And finally, I think the diversity at Whittier was really meaningful. I think a lot of schools, they like to talk about their diversity, and I think that a lot of them do a really good job of instilling a sense of diversity, but Whittier really walks the walk. And I think you realize that actually more as you move through life. I really appreciated the place that Whittier had in South and East LA County, that so many of the students that I met there were from that area. I got to understand Los Angeles in a way that really bucked a lot of the things that I heard about it coming from Seattle when I was younger. And it really opened my eyes to look at culture in a lot of different ways. And I continue to take that with me. I think, particularly in my current work and working with local action groups on the ground who are working to reduce poverty, it really reminded me of a lot of the great community organizations in and around the Whittier area that I got to work with when I was in school. And I think right now it's interesting because one of the big issues that we're working on at the Center for American Progress is LGBT homelessness. And we saw a lot of those issues going on around Los Angeles, and I have a lot of really great colleagues at Whittier who cared deeply about that before it even really hit the national radar. And I've been able to pull that with me along, and a lot of what I knew and the insights that I gained while I was in college have really informed the way that I approach the policy work that we're doing at CAP right now. So those are just a couple things that I thought were really important about my time there at Whittier and how those have carried with me up to this point. You've got a pretty good sense of my resume, but one of the things that I really appreciate about these opportunities is to really help students at the point that you're at right now, early in your career, before you're graduating school, to really think carefully about the wide net of opportunities in public policy. I'm really excited to hear about the diversity of things that you all are interested in doing. And I just want to put as much support out there as possible to think really creatively about all the different ways that you can accomplish the kind of social change that you're interested in doing. My career didn't take anything close to the path that I thought it would. I've ended up in a lot of strange places I didn't expect, but have turned into incredible lifetime opportunities. And most of that is because I really seized the advice I got from people who were working in policy and who were doing what I wanted to do, but I didn't realize what the path was to get to those different kinds of careers. And so I just encourage all of you to ask a lot of questions of people that are in jobs that you find interesting that might be unexpected, because I think a lot of us have gotten there in a lot of different ways. And I just think that we need as many students like yourselves out there in all different areas of the country working together to really help us bring about the kind of policy change we need to bring the U.S. into the next stage of where we need to go. So I'll just close up there and answer any questions.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for him? And if they do, just move more to the center where the camera is.
Hi. Yeah, let's just go this way.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. So yeah, it sounds like you work with homeless like youth, or you like what exactly is your work on for the homeless? Like what advocacy like activism could you kind of do there? Can you like explain that?
So, yeah, basically the Center for American Progress is, I'm not sure if any of you follow us. A lot of you might know our blog called Think Progress. That's sort of one of the things we're best known for. But we have a 501c3 that's a traditional think tank, and we're essentially the arch nemesis of the Heritage Foundation, which is a very well-known conservative think tank here in town. And we originally started by John Podesta, President Bill Clinton's former chief of staff. And what I do is run our national campaign against poverty, but what we do is we partner with local action organizations, many of whom are working on homeless issues, and we help supply the policy products that they need. So we do everything from infographics to providing stories and story banking ability so that they can deploy their stories in the media, to bold sort of policy proposals around how to do things like reduce homelessness or to address specific homelessness in the LGBT community or other communities of color. So I really sort of help supply content for the movement. And then we supply a really important communication infrastructure so that when local activists raise a ruckus around homelessness or any other issue related to poverty at the local level, we help amplify their voice and get it out into the larger media circles so that they can really make change with their actions.
Okay, and how does someone like try and get a partnership with you? Because I mean I just started a nonprofit. It hasn't gotten its 501c3 status yet, but it's a company in Oregon right now. But we're gonna try and file that. It works with homeless empowerment, homeless advocacy. So how does someone like me get a hold of or trying to establish a partnership with someone like you or with your company?
Yeah, we're my main goal. I do two things with Half in 10. I manage our annual report each year,
Mm-hmm.
and then the bulk of my time is really grassroots and field work. So I do a lot of partnering directly with local coalitions or local organizations, like the one you're talking about, and really just send me an email and we can help you link into some of our action resources. Like I said, one of the things I'm most excited about is that we're revamping the story bank of ours and turning it into a storyteller action network where we'll actually provide this really great online tool for local organizations to share their stories about every kind of issue under the sun. But we'll help them deploy those stories into the media the way that local organizations need to. We also have a great social media campaign called Talk Poverty, and we provide a lot of training and resources around that. And then we're going to be doing a really huge effort around the War on Poverty anniversary, which is coming up this year. So yeah, I'm sure Anna and Liz will be able to share my email, but we partner with a whole bunch of different organizations around the country, and I'd love to.
Okay, thank you.
I think college and if you end up going to grad school are some of the most important times to try to get experience working in local government, state legislatures. It's kind of a strange skill set that you learn working in legislatures that a lot of people don't understand. It seems like a little bit of a black box, like what exactly do you do when you're working, in a capital? And I've really been surprised at how empowering it is, even in these tough political times, both back in California or here in Washington, D.C., because even when it feels like nothing is getting done, when you're actually in the legislative bodies, you meet all the people who really are there for the right reasons and who rely on local activists to raise a ruckus, to get things done. And without the folks in the legislatures who are helping translate the action on the ground into really good policy making, we're really going to cheat ourselves because ultimately we're going to miss out on a really important thing. The Violence Against Women Act, I'm not sure how many of you guys followed our work on that this year, but that was a slog. That bill had previously failed through Congress without any issues for several different authorizations since 1994. And this year was the first time that the House Republicans were really blocking the new protections for LGBT immigrant and Native American women. And a lot of the reason that we finally got that through was both from our on-the-ground activists, but from a lot of folks locally at the states that we've worked with in different legislatures who've worked on anti-violence measures and initiatives who spoke up for us as well. So I think experience in Sacramento is absolutely valuable, and even if it's not what you end up doing down the line, having that legislative experience is a really important skill set that you don't get anywhere else. College is a great place to do it.
Okay, so that's great, thank you. And then should we not expect infrastructure change? Because essentially as a sociologist, that's what you want, right? Because these are where our problems lie and the way our society runs. So how do you put those expectations aside to try to chip away at this little stuff? Like, what's your personal opinion?
I think right now, on the practical level, what I think we're most missing right now are big ideas. It sounds really, pie in the sky, but a lot of our biggest changes in social infrastructure, other kinds of infrastructure, and political systems have really come when leaders have put forward a really bold vision. This is one of the reasons for poverty. We're really hoping to take advantage of the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty and help this country really understand that we've cut poverty in half twice in tough economic times in the past, and we can do it again. There's no reason. It's really about having the will to do it. And we've noticed with a lot of our activists lately, they're really beaten down because, all they're hearing is, well, don't cut SNAP, don't cut this program, don't cut WIC. We need to give them something to actually advocate for. We need the next war on poverty. We need a big idea that can help really change systems. And it's going to help work against this other view that we're disinvesting in this country and we're taking down ladders of opportunity for other Americans. So I think that that's a really important thing right now. And easy to think that it's just the political system, but in a lot of cases, it's because we need to think bigger and we need to put forward really bold approaches.
Cool.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good, okay, well, we're gonna have to move on to our next speaker, but thank you very much, Eric, that was great. We all want to give him a little.
So these are the things that I wanted to share. I have a great resume, I have a great bio, there's more to the story than what was shared just a moment ago, and I have so many different different descriptions of what it is that I'm doing and what it is that I've done. It's always interesting for me when I hear my bio, it's like, okay, so what was that one from? And I think that was a bio, it was a very, very brief bio that we used a couple of months ago. I was a keynote speaker for the Human Rights Commission in Marin. And what was happening there is there was a graduation of some students, these are high school students, that are doing, you know, just wonderful work in the community, various volunteer efforts, various social justice efforts, just young kids doing great work. And so each year, the Human Rights Commission holds an awards dinner for these young people. And I was asked to come and be the keynote speaker and talk about Bayard Rustin. Are you all familiar with Bayard Rustin?
Yes. No?
Yes and no? Okay. All right, well, get ready. Really briefly, Bayard Rustin was an African-American gentleman who, he's no longer with us, but he was one of Dr. King's key advisors. And in fact, he was the person that really taught Dr. King the principles of nonviolent movement. He had gone to India and he had studied with Gandhi and his folks this usage of nonviolence as a tool for movement. Bayard Rustin was also Quaker. Black man who was Quaker, who was really tall, good looking, and he was also openly gay. And so if you can imagine during those years, we're talking from the 1920s through the heights of the civil rights movement, it was very controversial, very risky and very dangerous to have an openly gay man out and about, let alone to be black as well. So the reason why I shared that is because no matter what your endeavors are, there are a few things I think are really key. One is that we always hope that there will be people like Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was the organizer of the March on Washington, which in August will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. You all are familiar with the I Have a Dream speech, right? Yeah. Okay. You can't be poets, you can't be Whittier poets and not be familiar with those very major events. And one of the reasons why I mentioned that, again, is that we always hope that there are going to be these very sort of firebrand leaders like a Martin Luther King or a Cesar Chavez or women that have come before in the women's movement. But the reality is that it's people on a day-to-day basis that have dedicated themselves to particular values. No matter what it is that you decide to do, one, be very clear as much as you possibly can on what your values are. Why do you want to do what you want to do? Why do you want to do what you want to do? Some things we do because it feels good, it sounds good, it seems like the right thing to do. But every day when you are taking on the responsibilities, the adventures and challenges of being an advocate or an activist, your values are going to be challenged. And you have to be prepared for that. And I think the best way to be prepared for that is just keep doing what you're doing, but also be open to having your values challenged. Some people get into, I think, the idea that being an advocate or an activist is just simply, I want to get out there and make a change and give voice to others without doing your own internal work in terms of what does that mean? What is it that I want to change and why? And how do I do that? I've seen very many people that I think dabble, and once they like the idea, they have a romantic notion of what it means to be an advocate or an activist. It can be certainly very exciting. I'm sure for Eric, as he said, he's had many an adventure and has been in places and will continue to go to places that he didn't expect to be in, but he's the better for it. But I think that the folks that get lost along the way, or the folks that don't do that internal work and continue to do that work, why am I doing this? Why is it important? And as my values are being challenged, what does that mean? And how do I make sure that I'm being effective along the way? So what is change? Why do you want to change it? And be as specific as you possibly can. When you're also talking about the idea of giving voice, again, it's the same thing. What does that mean? What does it mean to give voice to? And I think that once you are involved in a daily basis, I've been an advocate, I've been an activist for over 25 years now. I was an activist at Whittier College. We all have our ups and downs, but I'm very proud of the work that I've been able to do, and very proud of the things that I've been able to achieve, not individually, but through the work of being a practiced advocate and activist. Someone who is learning and has learned how to build coalition. Someone who is learning and learned how to work through the legislative process, how to work with communications people. That's a very different world. The world is very different in terms of communications and social media than it was in 1988 when I graduated from Whittier College. When I came to Whittier College, I stayed in Johnson Hall, which then was just is it still a women's dorm? No. And you were just so excited if you had an electric typewriter, which I'm sure none of you has ever seen. So the idea of being able to hone those skills, pay attention to those things, no matter what you do. But I know you guys are far more advanced than I will ever be. But those things are important. But those in and of themselves, those things in and of themselves, outsourcing, those kinds of things that we see online, which are changing the nature and the work of social justice work and other types of activism and advocacy. Those in and of themselves don't necessarily mean that real activism is going on. It's a tool. It's not the end of the process. So I hope that makes some sense, because I think it's really important to understand that when people are thinking of what it means to be an activist and what it means to be an advocate, that in the 21st century, in this 3.0 world, you still have to get out there and pound the pavement. You still have to get out there and meet with people face to face. You still have to get out there and talk with folks face to face. And you still have to get out there and listen to people with your own ears as they're speaking in their own voice. So it's very easy to have a very sort of sanitized view of what people need and what they want, so that you can represent them and have a sanitized view through the social media tools, because they're designed to basically just collect specific types of data for a specific point in time. But I really urge you, no matter what it is that you want to do, is to continue to do it the Whittier College way. And that is to engage with people face to face and to build a sense of community around your issue and your cause. Very important. It's the most humane way, I think, to move any kind of issue any kind of agenda as far as making the world better. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm gonna stop. I'm a little bit pooped. I've been organizing all week around Prop 8 in the Supreme Court and DOMA today. I led a march on Monday evening here in San Francisco from the Castro to City Hall, where we had some 4,000 people. My voice is a little hoarse. Led the march and spoke, and have still been engaged in the conversations with friends that are around the country around the fate of Prop 8 in particular. So at any rate, I'm still very glad that I could be here and look forward to engaging further with you all.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Do you have strength for a question or two from a student?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, is there anyone that would like to have the couch arm to sit on right here, the hot spot, and ask a question? Don't be shy. She sounds like she's pretty approachable.
I tried to move, but oh yeah.
No, thank you.
If you have a question later, we can connect you with her.
Yeah,
via email.
I'm good right now. I don't know what's
Is there
going
anybody
on.
else?
I can't hear.
Hold on.
Okay.
Can I stay here?
Yeah.
She can see me.
Can you?
Okay. Sorry. Hi. So your bio mentioned something about you working with getting the language of post or recently convicted people into their rights of voting again. If you can explain something about how you came about that and why that sparked an interest for you.
Sure. It's one of my favorite stories. In 1992, not long after I moved to San Francisco, I had worked for the California Assembly Legislature before I moved to San Francisco. So I worked for a legislator and an assembly member out from Riverside County. So I came to San Francisco, admittedly a little starry-eyed and really wanting to make a difference in grassroots progressive politics. So 1992, as you all may know, if reading the history books, was a very exciting year. It was an exciting year because we were poised to elect a new president, which eventually became Bill Clinton. It was also a time for elect women for a change, where we got more women into the U.S. Senate than had ever been. And in California, there were some very key issues facing low-income people. And the issue was that of cutting basically aid to families with dependent children by some horrible percentage. I don't even remember what it was now. I think it was like 25%, which would have put a lot of families on the street and made more families homeless. So this was something that Pete Wilson and his crew wanted to do. So I know we're supposed to have something of a nonpartisan conversation, but I'm a Democrat and I don't have anything that I ever want to do with Pete Wilson and his folks. So take that to the bank, Whittier College. The deal was that I was working at the time at a little storefront place called the Income Rights Project. We were trying to get folks registered to vote so that they could stand up for themselves. Again, when we're talking about giving voice, to educate them and support their ability to organize and fight back against this initiative on the ballot. So as we're doing that here in San Francisco, we're building a statewide coalition. It seemed as though we could never possibly win. We needed to get everybody we could registered to vote. That also included going out, of course, to the people that would be affected. That meant going out to public housing. That meant going out to some of the disenfranchised communities in San Francisco. So in doing so, as people were registering people to vote, they would come back to sort of our little headquarters and they say, Andrea, and do you all know the name Van Jones?
No.
Maybe not. Van Jones had worked briefly for President Obama, and he ended up leaving because folks were saying that he was a communist at one point. He headed up all the environmental justice policies for President Obama. Anyway, Van Jones and I were our friends. So they come to us and say, Van and Andre, we can't get the brothers to register to vote. Why not? Well, they're confused. They're saying that if they sign on the voter registration card, if you have a felony conviction, if you've been in jail, if you've been in prison, basically all those things, and you sign this, you can end up going to jail. He said, this isn't helpful. We have to have the brothers registered to vote. So we decided that we'd look at the language, and the language was confusing. So basically over a burrito, and all the great stories of activists always take place over some sort of meal. In my case at that time, it's a burrito. Van Jones had just graduated from Yale Law School and was working as a fellow at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. We decided that we would challenge the way the language was situated on the affidavit, voter affidavit. We did that, and we basically spelled out how we wanted the language to be so that it was clear and wouldn't chase people or scare people away from voting. I started a campaign with Van and some others we called the Right to Vote campaign. And the idea was to educate those persons, especially people that had been, were under the criminal justice jurisdiction in some way, were on parole or probation, and help them understand what their voter rights were. In California, the Constitution allows for, if you are on probation, if you are done with your parole, if you are awaiting trial for a charge of a conviction, you are allowed to vote. So, in a stroke of genius, so to speak, once we understood that, Van and I basically looked at each other over a burrito one day and said, wait a minute, if that's the case, we can go into the county jails and register people to vote. Because people are there, many of them are just there, they're on probation, they're awaiting trial, they've not been convicted yet, and they're being held as their, while their trials take place. So we figured we had a window of opportunity. Long story short, we talked the sheriff and the registrar into letting us into the jails. We organized some 150 people to be deputized by the registrar of voters to go into the jails and register people to vote absentee. The sheriff wasn't too happy about it in the end, because also on that ballot was his measure to build a new county jail. And that measure got shot down by about the number of people that we had vote from the jails. So he's never forgotten that. But eventually what happened is we decided that we would then, from that campaign, challenge Pete Wilson's his refusal to implement what was known as the Motor Voter Act of 1992, or the Voter Rights Act of 1992. And what that would do is open up voter registration in the various state departments. For instance, if you go to the unemployment or the employment development department, the DMV, and other places, that there's an opportunity for people to register to vote. He refused to do that, to implement it, and basically we sued him. So in the suit that I was part of, I was the lead representative plaintiff from the little coalition that I had put together, just basically to educate people on their voter rights, folks that had, that were under some jurisdiction of the criminal justice system. Now I am in a battle with the governor around his implementation or refusal. My case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the next best phone call that I've ever gotten in my life was from our attorneys at the Lawyers Committee that said, hey kid, you won. The court has upheld the rulings before. Pete Wilson will have to comply with the law. So I've actually won a case before the United States Supreme Court. Yours truly. And that was to open. What do you think of that?
All right. I have so much in my mind after hearing both Eric and Andrea. It was great to be able to hear from them. In thinking about what I wanted to tell you today, it really was about, it came back to this whole concept of leadership that we're really celebrating here at Whittier. And I wanted to maybe talk to you a little bit about what leadership means to me and for me, and maybe how Whittier sort of helped me get into that, because I think that leadership absolutely informs advocacy and activism. And I think without that, you may fall a little short in being able to do what you want to do. You need to have some of those skills to really get your point across and to win, U.S. Supreme Court cases, right? So for me, leadership is about passion. It's about perseverance. It's about vision. It's about patience. And it's really about doing the right thing. And I think sometimes it's difficult to do the right thing, to stay with your principles, to be able to articulate what those are. And I think that you're in a good place to be able to discover those things for yourselves, to figure out what it is that you're passionate about. I heard a lot of that in your introductions here today, and I see that you're on the road. I mean, you're ready to do something great, to do the right thing for whatever population is of interest to you, and that you can do that with your experiences here at Whittier. For me, I came to the department as an intern when I was a senior here at Whittier, and honestly, I took that internship because it paid. And it was a very few dollars that it paid. But I took it, and I thought, I loved kids. I loved working with kids. I worked over at Broad Oaks, and loved that, and just, I guess was sort of a kid myself at that age, but still wanted to do that. And so I thought I can get some really good experience. In return, I owed the county a year of service. As you can see, I have not left. It's been almost 16 years, and I have no plans of leaving anytime soon. So it's a good place to be. It's challenging, but definitely a good place to be. So I took that job to work with children and families, and especially those that had been affected by many social problems, like poverty, like child abuse, like substance abuse, domestic violence, all of those things that many of us come across either in our own lives or through people that we know. And sometimes it was homelessness. I've heard that come up a lot tonight. And it really took me a while to get my bosses to understand that homelessness was not a crime or a reason to take someone's children or be involved in their right and ability to parent. And so, advocacy started then. And I don't think I knew that that's what that was at that point, that there was a name for it. I just knew that it was the right thing. And I couldn't let my families down that I was working with. And so I worked as a social worker for a while, and then became a supervisor, and then had to advocate in a whole different way, because then I had that I was accountable to a manager, an administrative person that I wasn't sure had ever really done the job that I was doing. So that was a little bit challenging. But I had to advocate for my staff, for my social workers, and make sure that policies that were being misread and misused, that we could stop that practice because it wasn't helpful to kids and to their families. And so that, again, made me want to change the system. And I think I wanted to change the system from the point at which I entered it as a social worker. And I wasn't sure how I would get there or how long it would take or what I would do. And so to fast forward to today, as Linda read, I'm managing a grant that's out of President Obama's administration. It's a $100 million initiative with 6 grantees across the nation. One is California, and LA County is a sub-grantee for the state. And so I manage that project for our county. And it's really, the data was telling us that we've got kids in foster care that aren't able to live with their parents, and that the majority of those kids are African American, and that's a disproportionate representation of what the percentage of African Americans that make up society are. And so there are a few arguments about why that may be, or if that's really disproportionality. And you can listen to both sides of the argument, but essentially, I saw it as an opportunity to change the system, to change child welfare. And the way that we're going about doing that is by, and this is going to sound really basic, and it is, so you'd be right to feel that way about it, but is to create a practice model from which we practice social work with families. So does that sound pretty basic to you? Would you think maybe we might have that already? The largest child welfare agency in the country? Yeah, we didn't have it. We didn't even have a strategic plan for the agency until very recently. And without a plan, nobody knew where we were going. We had been through many, many directors, and without a vision, without a purpose, with just trying to sort of comply with the law or whatever we thought or we were told we needed to do. So in working in this way, I'm working with the California Department of Social Services up in Sacramento, and we're trying to develop this just uniform practice model that's very basic about how to work with families, how to ask good questions, how to find out what their story is, how to understand why and how they came to be in the situation in which they find themselves. And it's not always maybe what you might think. It's not just about drugs or violence or any of those things. There are a lot of underlying issues that are fueling that situation in their lives. And so without a real true understanding of what happened to find out what their story is, then you're not going to really resolve the issues that brought them there, and then you'll see them come back again and again to the system. It's a tough system to get out of. It's not so hard to get in, but once you're in, to really get your family out of that situation, it's challenging. So that's basically where I am. The advocacy is, I think, it's daily work, and it's certainly challenging. It can be exhausting, but it's worth it because it's the right thing. And for whoever your population is, wherever you want to be an advocate, whoever you want to lift up the voice of and help them lift up their own voice in the spirit of who and what they are, then that's your task. And it's noble, it's worthy, and it's exhausting, as I think, well, Andre's not even there anymore, but that Eric can tell you too. It's, but it's amazing. And to be able to see actual change happen, especially in a government agency, for me is enormous. It's just like the greatest thing. And it's not over, and there are struggles, with administration, with leadership. I don't think that, leaders that are elected or whether by the people or by whoever put them in that position, I don't know that they always share that vision of what it is to be a true leader and to help people move forward. So I guess that's it.
Well, Kimberly Ramirez, I think it's important to my identity to let you know that I am a daughter of immigrants from El Salvador and Mexico. So that's really important to the work I do now in regards to like immigration reform, but also to say that I'm proudly from Northeast LA, Cypress Park. So that's, if you guys know, I'm happy if you know where that is. If not, head out that way. And also to say that, you know, I started off as a transfer student. I didn't start at Whittier College like most of you guys did. My journey was somewhat long, but I did graduate from Whittier College. But I think it's important to emphasize that within Whittier College, it was volunteering different places. Like, you know, there's always this like, oh, I like this, or like what you guys are doing here now is like, oh, well, activism, advocacy, like, oh, maybe I should go to this talk. And I think it's important for all you guys to be able to do that and to volunteer. So one of my internships here at Whittier College was with the Los Angeles Dodgers. It was through their department, community relations department. And so that sparked my interest with community work. And so I did that a whole season long, and how philanthropy and professional sports kind of, you know, that fusion of what they're doing in the community. But after graduation, it was like, what do I do now? It was at the time where, you know, honestly, it sucked. There was no jobs out there. And for a couple of months of depression and submitting your resume everywhere, I did what most of you guys just do now, is Google. Like I Googled like public health, LGBT rights. That's what I Googled. And so like the biggest thing, my mom was like, okay, so you have no professional experience. Like you need to go intern somewhere. My mom's very wise. Right? And I was like, all right, so I got to intern somewhere. I have no money. I need it to be close to home, and I need to find somewhere. So that's how where I interned at was the Wall Las Memorias project. That's 10 minutes away from where I live. So what they do there and what I do now is our mission is based around preventing illness and promoting wellness. So with that, we focus a lot of our efforts on HIV/AIDS education and prevention. So you guys look around at each other, and you need to realize a quarter of the new HIV infection rates are ages between 13 and 24. So 1 in 4 of us here may be HIV infected and not even know. So that's part of what I do with my work, is to create a greater dialogue about HIV/AIDS and also about getting tested. Everyone goes to the doctor and it's routine, like, oh, check your diabetes, check your blood pressure. And that's what we try to do at our agency, is to normalize testing, especially in communities of color. That's who we focus on, especially Latinos and African Americans. So with that, I'm also, like you mentioned, I am also the lead in a new program in Southeast LA, not South LA, but Southeast LA. So the cities of Huntington Park, Bell Gardens, and Southgate. So if you didn't know, a lot of those communities are disproportionately affected with substance abuse issues, and also lack a lot of resources in those communities. So what I do with my program is create, because there is nothing, like when we get funding through counties or through LA County or through federal governments, you create programs. So we created a program based around having education sessions for youth, and also creating a coalition. I know Andrea mentioned that she does a lot of coalition building. So what I'm doing is actually creating a coalition. So getting law enforcement, getting city officials, getting other community-based organizations and community stakeholders to start advocating for their own communities. And I think we need to realize that everyone has different, like, you know, someone mentioned autistic kids, or you mentioned LGBT. Those are the communities you're going to want to advocate for. But at the same time, like, you have to have that passion for them and actually be part of that community, hopefully, you know, and advocate for them, because you see the need. And for this program, there's a huge need. And so a lot of it is, and you mentioned leadership skills, is actually, my boss always tells us that we're agents of change. So there is that fight in you to want to advocate for someone and wanting to be that person. And it's very important that you realize, like one of them mentioned, what their morals is, what their values are, and that you truly believe that and that you want to be part of that movement. And I don't want to take too much more time, but also volunteer different places. Even though for my job I'm doing mostly public health issues, but I get to volunteer all these different places. Like I'm part of a coalition called Latino Equality Alliance, and what we do is advocate for marriage equality. And even with my boss, like he's a huge political guy in LA. I was able to volunteer with the Obama campaign. For the last 2 weeks of the Obama campaign, I went to Pueblo, Colorado. If you don't know where Pueblo, Colorado is, I didn't know either. That's where I went for the last two weeks of the campaign, but that's something that I find interesting, and even if it's not part of my work, I'm doing it because that's what I love to do. So I think it's very important for you guys to know, like, even if you don't go into the work that you think you want to do, that doesn't mean you can't still volunteer or still be part of that movement. Okay, so I'll stop there.
Thank you.